We've all known people, maybe it's even us, who studied English for years in school but still can't hold a simple conversation. What is going on there? Why does it feel like we're all doing it wrong?
Because fundamentally we are. We're taught from day one to treat English like history or math, a subject to be memorized. But that's the single biggest mistake. It's not a subject, it's a practical skill, like swimming. You can't learn to swim by reading a book about it. You have to get in the water.
Right, and getting in the water means you're gonna splash around and look silly for a bit. That fear of making mistakes, of not having the correct answer, like in a school test, is what paralyzes people.
Exactly. The goal isn't to be a perfect speaker, it's to be an effective communicator. Embracing your mistakes is the only way to get there. Every error is just proof that you're trying, and every time someone understands you, that's a win. You have to celebrate being understood, not speaking flawlessly.
So, the first step is a mindset shift. Give yourself permission to be imperfect. Okay, I'm on board. With that new mindset, where do we start with the actual skills? Let's talk about listening.
Well, everyone says immerse yourself, but they usually do it wrong. They put on a Netflix show in the background while they cook. That's passive immersion, and your brain just treats it as noise. It's almost useless.
I see. So what's the alternative? What does active immersion look like?
It's about engagement. Take a 2-minute scene from that same show. First, watch it with subtitles in your own language to get the context. Then, watch it again with English subtitles, pausing to look up words you don't know. Finally, watch it with no subtitles at all. You just turn 2 minutes of TV into a 15-minute high-impact lesson.
That's a fantastic actionable tip. So listening is about deliberate engagement. Now, what about the skill that really makes people freeze up? Speaking.
Ah, the spotlight effect. You feel like everyone is staring, judging, and your mind just goes completely blank, even if you know the words. The only way to break that is to practice in a zero-pressure environment.
And how do you create that?
You talk to yourself out loud. It sounds strange, but narrating your day, I am making coffee, I am looking for my keys, builds the actual muscle memory for forming sentences and pronunciation. There's no one there to judge you.
That makes so much sense. You're building the physical and mental pathways without the fear. How does that practice then translate to real confidence when you finally have to talk to another person?
It directly lowers the stakes. You've already done the reps, so the act of forming words isn't new or scary. Then you can use a language exchange app. You're talking to another learner who gets it. You're not performing. You're just practicing a skill you've already been honing by yourself.
So, talk to yourself to build the foundation, then use an app for real-world practice. Got it. Let's move on to reading and the dreaded vocabulary lists.
Please burn the vocabulary lists. They don't work. The key is context. Don't memorize the word commute. Learn the phrase, I have a long commute to work. Your brain needs those connections. And for reading, just read what you actually love. If you love fantasy novels, read them in English. Your passion for the story will pull you through the difficult words.
Connect it to your passions so it doesn't feel like a chore. That's a great point. We've covered listening, speaking, and reading. The final, and maybe most important piece, is consistency. How do you keep going when the initial motivation fades?
You have to understand that consistency beats perfection every single time. A bad method you stick with for a year is infinitely better than a perfect method you abandon after a week. The secret is to set tiny, concrete, weekly goals. Not become fluent, but I will watch one 5-minute YouTube video in English every day this week.
And I guess you integrate it into your life, rather than trying to find extra time for it.
Precisely. Attach it to a habit you already have. Listen to an English podcast while you make your morning coffee. Change your phone's language to English. 15 minutes of focused engagement every day has a compound effect that is far more powerful than one long study session on a Sunday.
This has been incredibly clarifying. So, if we were to boil it all down, what are the absolute key takeaways for someone who wants to finally get fluent?
It's 5 things. First, change your mindset. You're a communicator, not a perfect speaker, so embrace mistakes. Second, practice active listening. Don't just have English on in the background. Third, build speaking confidence by talking to yourself first. Fourth, read what you love and learn vocabulary in full phrases. And finally, be consistent. Small, daily habits are everything. It's this total shift in approach that truly unlocks real English fluency.
You know, there's this incredibly frustrating point in learning a language where you feel like you've just hit a wall. You're not a beginner anymore. You can handle day-to-day stuff, but you're just stuck.
Oh, the intermediate plateau. It's so common. You feel like you can drive the car around your own neighborhood just fine, but the idea of getting on the highway to explore a new city is terrifying.
Exactly. It feels like you're using the same handful of words and simple sentences over and over. You can't really show your personality or crack a joke properly. The rapid progress you saw at the beginning just vanishes.
And that's the trap. It makes you feel like you're not learning anymore. But the problem isn't that you've stopped learning, it's that the nature of the learning has changed.
So let's break that down. A big part of it seems to be vocabulary. You can recognize thousands of words when you read them, your passive vocabulary, but you only ever use a tiny fraction of them.
That's the core issue. And there's a really simple but powerful way to tackle this: the Word of the Week challenge. You pick one new word or phrase, say versatile, and you force yourself to use it in conversation 3 to 5 times that week.
So it's not about just knowing more words, but about truly owning them through repeated, intentional use. It feels like you're actively building a toolkit instead of just collecting dusty words in your head.
Precisely. You're moving that word from passive knowledge into an active tool you can grab anytime. It's about building that active toolkit, one word at a time.
Right, so you're basically creating new pathways in your brain for that word. But what about grammar? How do you get out of the rut of just using the simple present and past tenses for everything?
Well, that's the second symptom, the grammar rut. We stick to what's safe. We're afraid to try more complex things like conditionals or the passive voice because we might get it wrong.
I see. So what's the fix for that?
It's a similar idea, actually. You give yourself tiny grammar missions. Instead of a vague goal like practice grammar, you say, today I will ask 3 questions using have you ever, or in my journal entry tonight, I'll use the past continuous at least twice.
That makes so much sense. It turns this big scary thing called grammar into a small, winnable game. It's targeted practice instead of just hoping for the best.
Exactly. You're isolating a weak point and strengthening it through focused repetition.
Okay, so we have vocabulary and grammar. But what about the third problem, which is maybe the most frustrating one, not sounding like yourself? You feel like a robot, even if you're funny and expressive in your native language.
Right, and the key here is to move beyond the textbook. This is where you need to start absorbing phrasal verbs, idioms, and even fillers. Things like look into instead of investigate, or natural pauses like, or, I mean,
So it's about shifting focus from just being grammatically correct to being linguistically authentic. It's the difference between knowing the rules of the road and actually driving with the natural flow of traffic.
that's a perfect analogy. It's about embracing the how of communication, not just the what. You learn this by listening to real people talk in podcasts, interviews, or TV shows, and noticing how they piece things together.
So we've covered vocabulary, grammar, and sounding natural. But what's the big mindset shift that ties all this together?
I think the most important change is to stop seeing yourself as an English student and start seeing yourself as an English user.
What's the difference there?
A student's goal is to be correct. A user's goal is to get something done. So instead of setting aside time to study English, you use English to do things you already love.
So, if you love gardening, you join an English-speaking gardening forum. If you love baking, you follow a recipe from a British chef on YouTube.
Exactly. Your focus shifts from the language to the activity. The learning becomes subconscious, a byproduct of you living your life. This is where the real lasting breakthroughs happen. It's the final step to go from being an English student to an English user.
That's a fantastic framework. So, for anyone listening who feels stuck, what are the key things they should start doing today?
First, turn your passive vocabulary into active tools with something like the Word of the Week challenge. Second, use focused grammar missions to get out of your grammar rut. Third, pay attention to how native speakers use phrasal verbs, idioms, and fillers to sound more natural. And most importantly, shift your identity. Stop studying English and start using English to do things you love.
There's this weird stage for people who get really good at English. They're fluent, they can work, they can debate, but they still feel off. Like they're in the uncanny valley of language. What is that final gap that separates them from a native speaker?
It's such a real feeling. And it almost always boils down to three things, and they're not what people expect. It's not about big grammar mistakes. It's about prosody, which is the music of the language, the rhythm, the stress, the intonation. Then you have fossilized errors, those tiny, annoying preposition mistakes that just won't die. And finally, a lack of deep cultural fluency, like not quite getting the timing of sarcasm or a subtle joke.
Okay, so let's break that down. Prosody, the music. That sounds so abstract. You mentioned a specific technique for this, shadowing too. How does that actually work for someone trying to capture that native rhythm?
Right. It's way more than just repeating what you hear. Shadowing, too, is like becoming a speech detective. You take a short audio clip, maybe a minute long, and you get the transcript. But instead of just reading it, you listen and physically mark where the speaker puts the stress, where their voice goes up or down. Then you practice recording yourself and comparing it directly to the original, trying to match that musicality exactly.
That's interesting. You're not just mimicking words, you're mimicking the melody. In the blueprint, you use the example "I didn't eat the last cookie." Can you walk me through how stressing different words there completely changes the meaning?
Absolutely. This is where prosody becomes critical for meaning, not just for sounding good. If you say, I didn't eat the last cookie, the implication is someone else did, stop blaming me. If you say, I didn't eat the last cookie, maybe you threw it out or hid it. But if you say, I didn't eat the last cookie, it means you ate something else, maybe the last piece of cake. The grammar is perfect in all three, but the message is completely different. That's the power of prosody.
I see. It forces you to listen actively, to deconstruct the sound. So once you've got the music down, what about the cultural side? The humor, the irony. How do you learn something that's not in a textbook?
You have to go where the language lives, in its most unscripted form. I always recommend two things: panel shows and late night talk shows. They are gold mines for seeing how native speakers actually interact. They interrupt, they banter, they use humor spontaneously. And for a more modern text-based version, find a subreddit on Reddit about a hobby you love. You'll see modern slang, informal arguments, and cultural references in their natural habitat.
That makes sense. You're observing the language in the wild. Okay, last one, and this might be the most frustrating for people: those fossilized errors. The tiny mistakes you know are wrong but keep making. What's the strategy there?
For this, you need outside help, but with a very specific mission. You hire a coach and tell them, your only job is to be my quality control inspector. Don't praise me, just hunt for my small, repeated mistakes. Then you start a mistake journal. Every time they catch an error, you physically write down the wrong sentence and the correct version right below it. The act of writing it down makes you conscious of the habit you're trying to break.
So it's about a total mindset shift. It's not about learning more vocabulary, it's about polishing what's already there.
Exactly. You're moving from being a student who is learning to a craftsman who is refining. The goal isn't just to get better anymore, it's about mastering that final 10%. It's about becoming a curious observer who really appreciates the texture and richness of the language.